stared at the moon and wondered what it would be like to go there? Well, the moon has been influencing people on planet Earth for a very long time. Everything from religions to farming has been affected. As our space age began taking shape in the late 1950s, we began planning a voyage to the moon. NASA, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, was created in 1958. It was their job to oversee the work necessary to get us to the moon.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth.
In 1961, President Kennedy decided that we should land on the moon before 1970, and it only took another 8 years to make it happen. So what about the moon? Is it a planet? Nope. While it's like a planet, it's called a moon, because instead of revolving or orbiting around the sun, it orbits a planet. In our case, Earth. There are 5 other planets in our solar system that have moons. In fact, Jupiter has 17 moons. Gravity is a force that keeps our feet and everything else on the ground. Moons have gravity too, but it's usually different from Earth's because they have different mass or size. There are some other interesting things about the moon too. For instance, as it orbits around us, it's also rotating at the same speed, which means we only see one side of it. The only time we've seen the other side, which we call the dark side, is when an astronaut or space probe has passed over it. The moon also passes through phases. Sometimes it looks really small, like a sliver, and other times it appears to be completely full. That's because as the moon orbits around us, it's reflecting light from the sun. Because the Earth is going around the sun and the moon is going around us all at the same time, the moon reflects different amounts of sunlight at different times of the month. The moon always looks like it's growing from small to a little bigger to really big and then back to small again every month. These changes take just over 27 days. Because there are more than 27 days in our months, the moon's appearance from small to big happens on a slightly different schedule each month. But the moon's orbit always stays the same, just over 27 days to go around the Earth. Finally, after years of developing and testing its knowledge, NASA was ready. It was the summer of 1969, and 3 brave men were ready to head for the moon. The whole world was watching as Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins climbed into their spacecraft.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff.
Because they named their lunar module the Eagle, their mission was called the Flight of the Eagle. At 9:32 a.m. on July 16, 1969, the Eagle left the launch pad atop the Saturn V booster rocket, which would lift them into space. It took only 12 minutes to reach an orbit of 110 miles above the Earth. Now they could shut the engines down for a couple of hours to make sure everything was okay and to do the first preparations for traveling onto the moon. Following this, they started the 3rd stage rocket and headed for the moon.
TMC looks good, flight.
25,553. H-dot is minus 4 balls 1.
4 days later, they entered an orbit around the moon and began setting their sights on a landing zone. They called the landing zone the Sea of Tranquility. They were supposed to rest and relax the day before the landing, but they were too excited. After orbiting the moon 10 times, Armstrong and Aldrin climbed into the Eagle lunar module, turned on the engines, and began descending to the moon's surface.
Eagle, Houston, we see you on the steerable, over. Roger, how does it look?
Eagle has wings.
Roger.
At the same time, Michael Collins was left alone in the mothership. He said he was very nervous for his crewmates. If there was any trouble down below, he would not be able to help them.
Capcom, we're go for landing. Altitude 4,200. Houston, you're a go for landing, over. Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet. You're looking great.
Suddenly, halfway through the 12-minute trip down to the moon's surface, one of the main computers began overloading. Armstrong and Aldrin were obviously pretty busy at the time, so the critical decision of whether or not to proceed fell on the shoulders of Stephen Bales, a computer specialist in Houston. Although he admitted later he was really nervous, at the time, he very calmly told everyone it was all right to go ahead and land on the moon. The computer would be okay, and it was.
Looking good, down a half. 6 forward. Lights on.
With 2 minutes of landing fuel left, Armstrong and Aldrin realized the computer had them heading for a field of boulders. They decided to take the manual control, and with only 30 seconds of fuel left, found a clear spot for the Eagle to land.
We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
It was 4:17 in the afternoon on July 20th, 1969. While NASA originally wanted the astronauts to take a nap and rest before going any further, they were so excited they received special permission to begin putting on their spacesuits right away. It took 6 hours, but Armstrong and Aldrin were finally ready to take that historic walk down the ladder. People around the world cheered as Commander Neil Armstrong became the first person to ever walk on the moon.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Aldrin followed, and for 2.5 hours, they performed a lot of experiments, picked up moon rocks, and played with the moon's low gravity. With their brief visit over, they climbed back into the Eagle and got ready for the nerve-wracking moment of starting the engine to rejoin Michael Collins in the mothership. It had to start, or they'd be stuck there forever. No one could rescue them.
Beautiful. Very smooth.
After a total of 21 hours on the moon's surface, the Eagle fired right up and lifted the 2 astronauts away from the moon. Meanwhile, Collins was trying hard to find them so they could link up. They headed for each other, connected in outer space, and got ready for the trip back to Earth. President Kennedy was right. We had made it to the moon by the year 1970. The astronauts were treated as heroes when they got home. There were celebrations, parties, and parades everywhere. It was an incredible accomplishment. There were 6 more missions to the moon after Apollo 11. Astronauts returned to the surface on all but one of them. We conducted many more experiments and tested lots of equipment.
Okay, let's go on back.
The moon was the first place in space humans actually visited. But our solar system and galaxies beyond promise to be a frontier which we will be exploring for lifetimes to come. If you've ever looked up at the sky and wondered what's up there, maybe you should study hard and become a scientist. Then someday you can help answer the important questions about outer space.